Hi, and welcome to In Search of Insight, Nootropics Depot's monthly podcast. I'm your podcast host, Erika, and sitting next to me is our product specialist at Nootropics Depot, Emiel.
Hey, everyone.
Today, Emiel and I are going to be telling you about magnesium, and we have done a podcast on magnesium in the past. Maybe you've seen it, but there's so much fascinating information about magnesium.
And we have a lot of new magnesium supplements, which we showed in the last new product video. We have 3 new ones, which we'll be talking about a lot today too. So that's one of the reasons we're also doing this video.
If you need a refresher on why you're taking your daily magnesium supplement, or if you're looking to try a different magnesium supplement, for example, or if you want to just know a little bit more about why magnesium is so important for our daily life and health functions, then you should definitely stick around, keep watching this video, and get ready, because we're going to be sharing some pretty mind-blowing information about magnesium, where it actually comes from in terms of where in the world and where we find magnesium.
Where in the universe, perhaps?
Yeah, the universe, that's an even better way to describe it. But we're also going to be talking about the different varieties of magnesium that Nootropics Depot carries, and which one might be the best for you based on your health needs and different elements that you might already have in your daily supplement stack.
And like always, we like to take these supplements on the actual podcast because we take these supplements and it's nice to beta test them live. Maybe you can see a little bit of a state change in us. With magnesium, it's not going to be that apparent, but we are going to throw a little bit of Tauromag into the mix today, and that we might feel as a very nice sense of relaxation. In fact, I know we will because we've been using Tauromag pretty regularly. So one of the things I thought we'd do this time, because it is a little bit hot today and we need to drink a little bit more water now, is to dissolve the magnesiums in water. And the 3 new magnesiums that we came out with, Tauromag, which is magnesium N-acetyltauronate, Magnesium Pidolate, which is the pyroglutamic acid salt of magnesium, and magnesium glycerophosphate, all dissolve well in water and are pretty much tasteless, a little bit of sweetness. So this is perfect for putting it in your water, drinking it throughout the day. This is a different way of getting your magnesium in. There does seem to be some research indicating that smaller doses of magnesium throughout the day is maybe the better strategy of enhancing overall magnesium status. So if you dissolve it all in maybe a liter of water, maybe 2 liters of water, that's your entire, for most people, they drink about 2 liters of water a day. Maybe you can push it up to about 4 liters. But if you dissolved maybe 200 to 400 milligrams of elemental magnesium in this water, you drank it throughout the day, you're getting a steady trickle of magnesium, which is potentially interesting. So that's one thing we're going to be doing here. It will only be over the period of an hour because we're keeping these podcasts a little bit short. So without further ado, let's make this drink.
So in one of our last podcast episodes where we discussed magnesium and why it's so important, we talked about the fact that plants are absorbing magnesium, and we do get a fair amount of magnesium from our diets, but as we'll talk about at length today, there is a huge difference in the amount of magnesium that we might get from our diet compared to supplementing magnesium. And we'll talk a little bit about the difference between taking a magnesium capsule versus taking the magnesium in smaller increments at a time, or, for example, like today, in a solution of water over the course of a day, and why this might be the more beneficial approach if you really want to dial in your magnesium.
Yeah, and that being said, there's also nothing wrong with taking a bigger dose of magnesium, and that's usually what Erika and I do. We just take our dose of magnesium glycinate in the morning, so we'll also be talking about that one. That's one of our favorite forms of magnesium, but things are changing a little bit now. So let's make this drink. Erika, I put some water next to you. If you want to open that, let's start with yours. So we'll do some magnesium pidolate, the pyroglutamic acid salt of magnesium. And this is really convenient. All of these new powders have scoops, so we can actually do this kind of live. One important thing to mention on magnesium pidolate and magnesium glycerophosphate is that, and this actually works quite well if you want to incrementally dose magnesium, but the scoops that are in there, 1 scoop is 1/3 of the total serving. So you can actually take 3 scoops throughout the day. Maybe if you have a glass of water with your breakfast, little scoop. With your lunch, little scoop. With your dinner, little scoop. And that way you can stretch out the dosing a little bit more. with that in mind, we're doing 1 scoop of magnesium pidolate because we want to round out the effects profile a little bit. Just 1 little scoop here. Okay, so that added, I believe, 40 milligrams of elemental magnesium. And we'll talk a little bit more why elemental magnesium is so important in the overall supplementation picture. But that added 40 milligrams. Magnesium acetyltaurate, or Tauromag. 1 scoop is providing 52 milligrams of elemental magnesium. And then we have magnesium glycerophosphate, which we are adding 2 scoops. So 1 scoop is providing 66.67 milligrams of elemental magnesium. And we want to bump that up a little bit because we want our total drink to be just over 200 milligrams of elemental magnesium. And with this whole mix, I think we are right at around 225 milligrams.
Yep.
So that's exactly where we want to be. That's kind of what we get from our daily magnesium when we take magnesium glycinate, which gives you 200 milligrams of elemental magnesium per serving. All right. And these are pretty much dissolved already. There have been some people who have been having some issues with just stirring it into cold water. Always keep in mind that when you're mixing up powders, you need quite a bit of agitation, especially the colder a liquid gets. Think about dissolving some sugar or salt in hot water versus cold water. It doesn't go very fast in cold water, it goes very fast in hot water. There's more energy in that hot water that allows you to dissolve it a little bit better. So, in lieu of warm water, we shake it. And that's it. It dissolves really easily. If I look in here now, yeah, there are a few floating particles. That's okay. That will dissolve over time, and give it a little shake and drink it, and then you get everything in. But I have, with all of these forms of magnesium, they dissolve into a clear liquid. We actually showed this on our new product video with magnesium. So these are very nice to use in this kind of format. And cheers.
Cheers.
Should just taste like water. Yeah, tastes like water, but it's slightly more sweet.
Yep.
It's a little bit more mineral. Magnesium has quite a nice effect on water. And we'll talk about this a little bit more as our main sources of magnesium a little bit later. But first, we have to go way, way, way back. We had this question. So here's an important thing to know about magnesium right from the get-go. Magnesium is a metal. Plants cannot synthesize metals. They can't just make magnesium. So our main source of magnesium is coming out of the earth, out of the soil, out of weathered rocks and mantle and crust that over the years have gotten weathered and have released magnesium ions into the soil, and then those magnesium ions through water make it into plants. Then those plants are eaten by animals. We eat those animals, we get magnesium, or we take the more direct route and we just eat the plants ourselves. And that's where we get the majority, if not all, of our elemental magnesium from over most of the world.
And if you remember from our last podcast episode, we talked about why we can think of dark leafy greens as magnesium indicators, sort of a natural color indicator for the amount of magnesium that's in a plant. So when people tell you to eat spinach or kale for good magnesium content, that's a really great example. They're both super dark green, and magnesium is contributing to that super dark color. So that's why dark leafy greens are often recommended in terms of getting your daily nutrients, and specifically for magnesium.
And why is that?
That's because the magnesium helps the chlorophyll process.
Correct. Magnesium plays an important part in chlorophyll. So without magnesium, no chlorophyll. Without chlorophyll, you don't have good photosynthesis. So basically, all leafy greens contain some level of magnesium, usually quite high, but that has also started to change a little bit. And that's all because magnesium is coming from soils. Plants aren't synthesizing the magnesium. So if there's not enough magnesium in the soil, even though that plant does have the capacity to take up a lot of magnesium and store it, and then when we eat it, we get a lot of magnesium. That magnesium has to come from somewhere.
And that's a great reason why, for example, the plants we have behind us, we give them magnesium supplements every once in a while, because there
Makes them a
isn't...
little more green.
Exactly, and there isn't a natural source of magnesium beyond the ground that they're just planted in. So once the plant has eaten up all of that magnesium that's in the plant pot, it needs more, and we're going to give it to them rather than it soaking up that magnesium from other water sources or the soil surrounding.
Well, and keep in mind that the water that we are giving those plants contains magnesium. So a nice thing about the Netherlands is we're quite serious about water quality, and we can actually print out a little analysis of our current water. And our current water is averaging at 11 milligrams of elemental magnesium per liter. So that's just really quick as well. Elemental magnesium is referring to magnesium in its most elemental form, which is as a metal. That helps us set the dosing. So for example, when we have magnesium glycinate, that's not all magnesium. So each capsule of magnesium glycinate contains 100 milligrams of elemental magnesium, but it contains 800 milligrams of magnesium glycinate. And that's because a big part of magnesium glycinate is actually glycine. It's somewhere 70%. So if we're using that 800 milligrams as an indicator for how much magnesium we're getting, that's incorrect, because that's also taking into account the weight of the glycine. So everyone refers to magnesium supplementation as elemental magnesium, because that's how you actually set the proper levels of magnesium that you should be taking in. And those levels are quite different throughout the world, the recommended daily intake. In the US, it's right around 400 milligrams of elemental a day. That's similar in various European countries. And in certain countries, it's a little bit lower. It's like 320 milligrams or something like that. But the consensus is generally there that we need about 300 to 400 milligrams of elemental magnesium to perform at our best. And that's also because in ourselves, we need magnesium to stabilize ATP. So if we don't have ATP, none of the cellular machinery is working, because that's the energy currency that all of our cellular processes use. And we need magnesium to stabilize ATP. And magnesium is also used in a bunch of other biological processes. I think there's about 300 different enzyme processes in our body, really critical enzyme processes that rely on magnesium. And we use more magnesium when we're stressed, for example. We'll get to that a little bit later. But let's back it up. Where is this magnesium coming from? And I think this is really interesting.
This is super exciting.
It's coming from our soil. But how did it end up in the soil? And it ended up in the soil because many billions of years ago, maybe even trillions of years ago at this point, there were massive stars. I mean, those stars are still there, but specifically in our solar system, there were some really massive stars. And those massive stars that are much, much bigger than our sun, are incredibly active synthesis machines, basically. There's a process called stellar nucleosynthesis. And this process, it begins with hydrogen under extreme temperatures, so about 15 million degrees Celsius, I believe, and really, really high pressures. And then that hydrogen starts smashing into each other, and at certain points things start sticking, and you get helium, you get different forms of helium, then that helium starts smashing into each other, and then you keep getting more complex and heavier elements. One of those being beryllium, and that's one of the first ones that seems to be formed, and then you get magnesium, you get iron, you get all of these elements that are being produced in the center of these stars because of nuclear radiation. It's a really big nuclear generator, basically, with really extreme temperatures, and that makes these minerals. But how does it end up in Earth? So after these giant stars run out of fuel to burn, the hydrogen predominantly, they go supernova, so they explode. And then all of these elements that it's been creating over billions of years spread throughout they call it the interstellar medium. And I'm struggling through this a little bit because this is not my area of expertise. We should definitely have an astrophysicist on at some point, but just a brief high-level overview. So, giant star makes magnesium, explodes. Now you have magnesium dust all throughout the universe, and then this dust forms clouds. There's gravity going on, and that pulls these clouds in, and then lots of really complex processes end up happening, and these particles start smashing into each other, and they get denser, and they kind of stick together, kind of like a hairball or something at a universe scale. And then you get these small little planets, I believe they're called planetesimals, and they start smashing into each other, and they start sticking together, and then you get planets. So all of that, those elements, that dust that was created in these stars exploded and goes all over the place. There's magnesium in there. That gets condensed, and now we have the ancient Earth, I believe about 4.6 billion years ago. And so much mass got into Earth and all of these crazy universe scale events that are happening. The Earth started to melt, and a lot of these heavier elements, like iron, sunk to the core. That's where we get our magma core, high in iron. And then lighter metals, like magnesium, floated a bit more to the top, and they're in the mantle and in the crust. And then through tectonic movements, through water, through gas, through microbes, through plants, a lot of this magnesium gets liberated, and then you have magnesium ions that end up in the soil. And what's interesting as well about soil is basically the breakdown products of rocks. So that's one of the main things. And then you get organic matter in there, but a lot of it is inorganic matter. It's minerals. And you actually see soil, and I forget the exact name, but on other types of planets, even on the moon, there's soil, but it doesn't contain organic matter. So that's one really important thing about soil on Earth. It contains organic matter, but more importantly, it contains a lot of minerals because of the rocks that have been weathered and all of these different processes. So now it's in the soil. Now it's in a form that magnesium can be taken up by plants, can be taken up by us, and then we poop it out, we pee it out, and then it just recirculates. And it keeps going and going and going. But if you have a plot of land that's not constantly being regenerated, and you keep putting plants in there that are sucking magnesium out of the soil, and you're not replenishing that magnesium, then at a certain point you're going to have less magnesium in the soil, which means that the magnesium content of vegetables is going down, and the magnesium content of animal proteins is going down because the stuff that they're being fed contains less magnesium. So because of that, there have been studies looking at the composition of our foods over the last 100 years or so, and we've seen a reduction of about 24 to 30% in magnesium levels and other minerals. And modern processing, for example, turning a whole grain wheat into white flour, removes about 80 to 90% of the magnesium content in the whole grain wheat. So we've invented many, many processes to limit the magnesium in our food, and we've been farming in an unsustainable way that's removing magnesium from our soil. And what this is resulting in, and let me take a very quick breather break and some water with magnesium. So eventually what this leads to is a slowly growing trend in which a lot of us are not eating enough magnesium or not taking in enough magnesium through our diet. So again, I mentioned the ideal intake level is about 400 to 420 milligrams of elemental magnesium. In the US, I believe the average is around 220 milligrams. So now maybe that elemental dose of 200 milligrams is starting to make sense. If we're getting about 220, then we need about 200 more to get us to 420. That's the level we want to be at. So that's in the US. Lots of over-farming, lots of processed foods, and you clearly see this back. I believe 60% of the population is not getting enough magnesium. And then they have subclinical magnesium deficiency. So they're not showing major symptoms of magnesium deficiency, but it's also not optimal, and they're showing some aspects of a magnesium deficiency. This can manifest as restlessness, higher incidences of stress, cognitive decline. Minor, but they start to stack up the longer that you're not getting in enough magnesium. So this seems to be an issue globally, but there are places around the earth where we eat less processed foods, where a lot of high quality food is being grown in high quality soil. So if you look, for example, at Italy, in Italy, you see the average intake going up a little bit. And unfortunately, there's not data for this for every country, but in Italy, the magnesium intake is closer to 300 to 400 milligrams of elemental magnesium a day. So a lot of Italians are already eating enough magnesium. So maybe for our Italian viewers, if you're eating a very traditional Italian diet full of whole foods, maybe you have nothing to worry about. Even better, if you're one of our German customers, it seems like the average intake of magnesium in Germany is 511 milligrams per day.
That's super high.
That's really high.
That's the highest of the data.
That's the highest that I've seen, and that's about 100 milligrams even over the recommended daily intake. Why is this? Well, water is a very important source of magnesium, and if you see a lot of mineral waters, they're coming from rocks. They're flowing through rocks. And they're picking up minerals during this process. And for example, one of our favorite German waters, Gerolsteiner, has per liter 108 milligrams of magnesium. That's a quarter of what you need, more than a quarter than what you need just in a liter of water. And with the recommendation of people drinking between 2 to 4 liters of water, a German individual who's solely drinking Gerolsteiner could get their entire magnesium supply just from water. Now, if I compare that to what I remember when we lived in the US, a lot of the water we were drinking, people were very proud to tell us, yeah, I have a reverse osmosis filter. Taste how clean my water tastes. And yeah, it tastes clean, but I'm used to fairly high mineral water here and throughout Europe. So to me, there is always something a little bit off. There's a bit of a sweetness, a fullerness in water that has a high mineral content, some of which almost taste salty, like there's a Spanish one called Vichy Catalan. That one's very, very high in dissolved solids, including magnesium and sodium, and that one almost tastes salty. Gerolsteiner is almost there a little bit too. And in the US, I wasn't tasting this. There was a lot of reverse osmosis water. I even knew people who were drinking distilled water because it was really clean, which is completely devoid of minerals. So water is maybe not a very high source of magnesium intake for many people around the world. But in Germany, clearly it is. And you see that their average magnesium intake is massive compared to the rest of the world. So maybe drink some more mineral waters. Or if you want to do it a little bit simpler, consider that you're probably consuming about 200 to 300 milligrams of magnesium per day. So if you add another 200 milligrams of magnesium to your diet through a supplement, you're probably good. And maybe you don't even need that much. And that's where you can really pick and choose the different magnesium products that we have to calibrate where you want your elemental magnesium dosage to be. And I think that's one of the reasons why we've really built out our magnesium catalog. One, we really love magnesium. For me, I get pretty frequent headaches and migraines, and magnesium helps a lot with that. I notice if I don't have magnesium in my stack, migraines come back, headaches come back. So for me, that's a really, really important part of my stack. For Erika, it's with cramps.
And muscle cramps, just a little bit of tension in general, as well as some difficulty getting higher sleep quality.
And then another one is just how you poop. If you're a little bit constipated, it could also be that you're not getting enough magnesium in. Magnesium controls that process too. It controls how much fluid is being pulled into your stool. If your stool is very dry and you're a bit constipated, maybe it's because you're also not getting enough magnesium. So magnesium has a lot of applications there, and I think almost anyone can benefit from a little bit of extra magnesium.
Magnesium is often one of the first supplements that people reach towards when they're putting together a stack, but there's so many different specific reasons why we want to be taking magnesium, and the type that you go for can have benefits more for sleep or for focus or for mood. So we're going to talk a little bit about that with these different varieties of magnesium, and specifically the newer magnesiums that we've just come out with, in terms of what their kind of intended uses for and what some of those more perceptible benefits are going to be once you start supplementing with magnesium for a couple of weeks. That being said, magnesium isn't necessarily the most nootropic supplement out there, but I do feel
I
that
disagree,
it's having...
but we'll talk about that later.
Well, sure. Let's just put it this way. I said the most. It is nootropic, but I don't think, in my experience, that it's the most nootropic supplement that I've taken, especially if I compare it to something like Kana or other plant extracts, for example.
For sure.
But magnesium does give a subtle mood boost, relaxation, and eases the tension. And I'm already noticing this myself. I feel that my mouth is a little bit lubricated, like my saliva is a little bit more smooth, and I'm finding it slightly more comfortable. It's a pretty hot day here, and sometimes my mouth can get a little bit dry, especially if I'm speaking a lot. And I don't feel that at all right now. I feel quite moisturized and lubricated, and this is something that I know is coming from magnesium, especially when I'm drinking it in a solution form. And another thing I'm noticing is that I'm feeling quite relaxed, and I'm also feeling a little bit more physically aware, I would say, to the point where it's making me a little bit more aware of my posture and some tension, because it's easing the tension rather than settling into that even further.
And this is a really good jumping off point to talk about the different magnesium forms, and that the most important thing with picking a magnesium form is whatever it is complexed with. So what Erika is describing, in my opinion, currently has absolutely nothing to do with magnesium. We've been taking magnesium for a really, really long time. Our magnesium status, therefore, is probably really good, which means that we're probably not going to notice a massive shift from just the magnesium alone. What we're noticing here is the acetyltaurate portion of Tauromag. Acetyltaurate seems to have quite a relaxing effect. In the context of magnesium, that gets taken up another notch. So in the case of Tauromag, it's very relaxing, and that's really nice. So in this case, the unique effect that Erika is feeling is coming mostly from the acetyltaurinate portion of Tauromag. And this is because acetyltaurine has effects on GABA receptors, on the GABA B receptor. It's a calcium channel blocker, so it has some physically relaxing effects. And one of the things that Tauromag does, or the acetyltaurinate portion, can actually help transport magnesium to the brain. So we have more magnesium in the brain because of that, and now we have the acetyltaurine in the brain, which then has a relaxing effect throughout our central nervous system, and that's going to have physically relaxing effects. In our experience, Tauromag, due to this, has one of the strongest acute effects. So it really kicks in right away, but it doesn't have a whole lot of magnesium content. It has 52 milligrams of elemental magnesium. So maybe if you're an Italian or you're a German and your magnesium intake is very high, Tauromag by itself might be just perfect for you to add a little bit more magnesium to your dietary intake. However, if you are an American, then 52 milligrams of elemental magnesium is going to take you from maybe like 220 milligrams of dietary magnesium intake to just under 300 milligrams. So still quite a bit short of your 420 milligrams elemental per day. However, you can take advantage of its unique effects, and that's why what Eric and I just did is quite interesting. Not necessarily recommending that you have to go out and buy 3 different forms of magnesium, but if you did want to play around and make your own stacks and kind of steer the effects profile with whatever the magnesium is bound to, then this is a good way of doing it. So within our little drink that we made, we had a full dose of Tauromag. That's giving us that nice physically relaxing effect, and 52 milligrams of elemental magnesium, which I have deemed for myself is probably not enough. Then we added in 2 scoops of magnesium glycerophosphate. It's a really good source of magnesium. It doesn't taste like a whole lot, and it doesn't really produce any crazy effects. It gives you a bit of glycerol, which helps with hydration, and it gives you a little bit of phosphorus, which is an important electrolyte. So in terms of a more electrolyte replenishing type of drink, magnesium glycerophosphate is good for that, and that's why we put in 2 scoops. It's a little bit hot today, we want a little bit more of that hydration, and that's a good way for us to get another 120 milligrams of elemental magnesium in there without changing the effects profile too much. The effects profile for this drink is really being based on the Tauromag, which is giving that initial quick relaxing effect, but then also the magnesium Pidolate. So the pyroglutamic acid that it is bound with closely resembles the early days of nootropics, the Georgia era nootropics, if you know what I'm talking about. I can't go into it any further. So you have a unique nootropic effect there. Pidolic acid or pyroglutamic acid also helps magnesium get to the brain more easily and enhances intracellular stores of magnesium. That's an important aspect that I want to touch on, but let's move through our little stack a little bit here. The magnesium Pidolate adds some focus, adds some mental clarity. I personally am not a huge fan of magnesium Pidolate at full doses because I don't respond particularly well to those Georgia era nootropics. If you do, full doses of magnesium Pidolate all day long. We've had some very positive results with it with some of our customers. For myself though, a single scoop, a third of the dose, is actually really nice because it adds just a little bit. It doesn't produce any negative effects for me, but it adds just a little bit of mental clarity that I find works well with the Tauromag. And then, of course, the little bit of extra magnesium from the magnesium glycerophosphate, which is just providing magnesium and in my opinion is not going to have a very noticeable effect. So, to move through the rest of our magnesium products very efficiently, let's split them up into some groups. So we have the group that is neutral magnesiums. These are magnesiums that don't do a whole lot other than providing magnesium in a high bioavailability way. And this is where I want to talk a little bit about intracellular and extracellular. Magnesium is a cation that mostly exists within cells. That's where most of it is stored. And within these cells, that's where it gets complexed with ATP and helps stabilize ATP and has all of these cellular effects that we need. For example, magnesium is a good calcium channel blocker. So having it inside of the cells means that not a whole lot of calcium can come into the cell. Magnesium helps regulate that process, which is really important, for example, for muscle cramping, because when calcium flows into a muscle cell, it contracts. And when calcium flows out of a muscle cell, it relaxes, decontracts. So if you have a lot of calcium and you don't have that magnesium to help dispel that calcium, you're going to cramp more often. And when you add magnesium to it, you're limiting the amount of calcium that can come into the cell, and you're also modulating the sodium-potassium pump and allowing more potassium to come in and out of the cell, which also has a positive effect on muscle cramping. But I'm getting a little bit off topic here. What we're focusing on here is just providing neutral amounts of magnesium to help you hit that elemental magnesium dosage. So we have Micromag. It's magnesium oxide that's been loaded into a sucrose ester. So those are some of the intracellular uses of magnesium: pumping that calcium out, regulating the electrolyte balance, stabilizing ATP, all of these extremely important activities that are happening within cells, and this is why magnesium is mostly stored within cells. But then you also have magnesium outside of the cells, and you call this extracellular magnesium. It's the magnesium that when you draw some blood and you just test your blood, then we call that the serum part of your blood. That's where you'll find some magnesium. But that's actually not very indicative of magnesium status, because you could have large amounts of extracellular magnesium and not inside of the cell. So it's actually important to test intracellular magnesium levels. But in the context of magnesium bioavailability, pretty much every form of magnesium will absorb pretty well. The thing is that some of these bioavailability enhanced, or actually most of the bioavailability enhanced ones, are particularly good at bringing magnesium into the cells. But you do want kind of a balance between the two, and if I have to be very critical and look at our magnesium catalog, we spent a lot of time on these really exotic, high bioavailability forms of magnesium that can very accurately increase the intracellular concentration of magnesium. But extracellular magnesium is also important for things like blood pressure, various cardiovascular effects. So that's important too. And more basic forms of magnesium are better at enhancing extracellular amounts of magnesium, but they're not very good at increasing intracellular magnesium. So for future projects, we might want to look at that. There's actually a good study that looks at magnesium acetyltaurate, Tauromag, compared to magnesium malate. Magnesium malate is not very good at increasing intracellular stores of magnesium. So a lot of people would say, yeah, that's probably a bad, low bioavailability form of magnesium. Whereas Tauromag is very good at increasing intracellular stores of magnesium, but you detect almost no extracellular magnesium when you supplement with Tauromag. So I think in the future we might add a few more of these really basic forms like magnesium citrate, magnesium malate, some of these more organic forms, and I think that will help round everything out, because then we can enhance our intracellular stores and our extracellular stores. But for right now, let's focus on one of the more important aspects of magnesium supplementation, that is increasing intracellular stores, which a lot of our magnesium forms are perfected for. So
before we jump into that, let's drink a little bit more of our magnesium solution, because it's getting really warm in here.
It is. I actually finished mine already.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Awesome. Okay, well, I need to catch up then. Let's get into it.
I wish I had some more. It actually tastes really nice.
It does.
I really prefer the taste, even though we have pretty high mineral tap water that we drink here very often. Adding that magnesium to it just makes it extra special. And a lot of people probably think I'm crazy that you can detect taste differences in water. But trust me, go pick up a bottle of Gerolsteiner, a bottle of San Pellegrino, Vichy Catalan, and then like some Smart Water or Dasani or something, and tell me there's no difference.
While we're talking about sparkling water for a moment, I wonder what the magnesium content of Topo Chico is. We don't have that here, but it just crossed my mind. Something to look up after the podcast.
Yeah, that's a really nice one. I would assume it's probably a little bit lower in magnesium than some of these more European waters that seem to be really high. Part of it is also some of these seem to be naturally carbonated at the source already, and that helps pull out some of the magnesium from the rocks that it's in, blah, 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 blah. There's a lot of information about that. But let's get back to magnesium.
Yes.
So our neutral magnesium category. Micromag is one of the big ones. It's magnesium oxide. Nothing fancy going on there. Then it's loaded into a sucrosomial ester, kind of like a liposome or a phytosome. It basically gets microencapsulated. I like calling this a Trojan horse. You put the Trojan horse in your body detects a sucrose ester, kind of like a fatty acid, something it wants to absorb. And it shields the magnesium. Once it's been absorbed, once it goes into the cells, that outer coating falls away and reveals magnesium oxide, which is now inside of a cell. Great. So sucrosomial magnesium is a good way of enhancing intracellular stores of magnesium without producing any other real effects. And I would say Micromag is the magnesium I reach for most often. Right now we're on a little bit of a magnesium glycinate kick, but usually we have Micromag in our stack because it delivers 200 milligrams of elemental magnesium in one capsule. That's just convenient, especially if you're going traveling and you make your little travel boxes, or maybe you make your pill divider boxes anyways for the week. It's better to have things be more concentrated. So, for example, with magnesium Pidolate, with Magtein, even with magnesium glycerophosphate, which is a bit higher but still not super high, you need like 3 capsules to get to 144 milligrams, or in the case of magnesium glycerophosphate, 200 milligrams of elemental. Whereas with Micromag, the concentration of elemental magnesium is much higher because of that unique sucrosomial ester with the magnesium oxide being inside. So you can get away with smaller amounts of material providing more elemental magnesium without any other effects, which makes it easy to integrate within a stack. For example, this Tauromag can make some people quite tired. It's quite relaxing. So if you're trying to, for example, make a stack that's more based on stimulation, like you have some Subroxy in there and you have some Tribugen in there, and you want to maximize that stimulation, and now you add in Tauromag, you're pulling down that stimulation again. Maybe that's exactly what you want, maybe that's exactly not what you want. And in that case, if you did want to take magnesium and you didn't want to have it affect the rest of your stack, something like Micromag is really good because it hides in the background and still provides a good amount of magnesium at high bioavailability. Now, another neutral magnesium is magnesium glycerophosphate. This one would be a little bit better if you're an athlete. You're using magnesium in the context of workouts where you're losing quite a bit of sweat, you're losing quite a bit of magnesium, your electrolyte balance might be a little bit off, then that's a really good form. And it's also neutral. So if you prefer to drink your magnesium, Micromag is not a good option because it doesn't dissolve all in water. It just floats to the top and kind of goes into a gummy ball. Not what you want. Magnesium glycerophosphate dissolves very easily in water, doesn't taste like a whole lot. It's actually one of the powders that isn't clumping up at all. The humidity has been really high here, so that's been a stress test for a lot of our powder products. Tauromag has clumped up a little bit, magnesium Pidolate has clumped up a little bit, but magnesium glycerophosphate completely just fine. And I think this is probably because one of the main anti-caking agents is also phosphorus-based, so phosphorus might have an effect here. Really cool if you don't want your powders to clump up. There's nothing really wrong with powders clumping up, but it's nicer if they stay free-flowing, especially with a scoop. It's easier to dose. But that's a really good form of neutral magnesium if you want to drink it. So, neutral magnesium category. Now, the next category would be our nootropic category, and there's going to be 3 magnesiums in there. The first one is Magtine. This is magnesium bound to L-threonate. This is a form of magnesium that was developed at MIT by some MIT researchers and was one of the first magnesium supplements that really highlighted the nootropic potential of magnesium. And one of the unique things about magnesium threonate, or Magtine, is that it's very, very good at enhancing intracellular stores of magnesium, and specifically intracellular stores of magnesium in the brain. And it seems like when you increase the intracellular content of magnesium in neurological cells, you can enhance synaptic growth. You can enhance neuroplasticity. And this seems to be a little bit where the nootropic effects of Magtine are coming from. But what's really interesting is if you have a very high intracellular magnesium level and a low extracellular magnesium level, then those passive pumps that pump magnesium in and out are going to not work as efficiently if they're detecting low levels of extracellular magnesium. So under normal circumstances, if we're adding more magnesium, but our intracellular stores are already really high, and we're probably not going to be taking in a lot of more intracellular magnesium. Maybe it's going to be sticking in the extracellular space a little bit more, and there's a balance between those. I think the really unique thing about Magtine is that we can kind of come over this process and increase intracellular levels of magnesium beyond what is normally possible. And because of this, I think you see more neuroplasticity. So threonic acid is very important there, but also magnesium in general is very important there. Having the right amount of extracellular magnesium and then having the threonic acid interact with the glucose transporters, which then helps it get into cells, that seems to be one of the mechanisms by which Magtine works really well. And a lot of people claim that it works extremely well. I've used it myself too. There's a bunch of studies on it. That's a really good one if you're very focused on the nootropic effects, and maybe your magnesium need isn't that high, because with Magtine, it's quite expensive. It is an MIT-created ingredient. A lot of research went into it. That demands a higher price. It's a patented ingredient. There's no way around this either. We're stuck with Magtine. We did at some point try offering a generic. That doesn't work with their patent system. But one interesting thing there is genuine clinical data on Magtine. It seems to work really well. A lot of people enjoy the nootropic effects, and based on that, if you're focused on the nootropic effects and you don't have that much need for elemental magnesium, go for Magtein. It's really good. If you want to have Magtein, but you still want to hit that 200 milligram elemental magnesium dose, one really good strategy is to do Magtein during the day and then at night take Tauromag. That extra 52 milligrams of elemental magnesium gets you almost right to that 200 milligram level and is going to help enhance your sleep quality. And I think those two are going to have a synergistic effect together, especially considering that Tauromag is also a good way of increasing intracellular levels of magnesium in the brain. Our other nootropic form of magnesium is magnesium pidolate. So we talked about that a little bit already. Magnesium pidolate, the pyroglutamic acid portion, also has good intracellular penetration. It also seems to get magnesium into the brain quite readily, and the pyroglutamic acid portion itself is nootropic. So I would say that's a really good competitor for Magtein. And up until magnesium pidolate came out for us, there really wasn't a competitor for Magtein except Claromag, which we'll talk about next. But magnesium pidolate, again, a really interesting option, but again, not very high elemental magnesium content. So if you take full dose, your full daily dose of magnesium pidolate, you're getting 120 milligrams of elemental magnesium. So then you could add another scoop of magnesium glycerophosphate or something like that to kind of get you to that 200 milligram level. So again, using all of these different forms of magnesium, you can be quite granular in your dosing and in your effects profile, which I think is really interesting and one of the reasons why we have built out such an extensive magnesium catalog. And Erika and I personally switch between these magnesiums a lot because it's fun to switch between them. And we want magnesium in our stack, and sometimes you want to experience a different type of magnesium. And then we have Claromag. So Claromag, one of the reasons why magnesium has a nootropic effect is because it blocks the NMDA receptor. And it blocks the NMDA receptor because the magnesium ion just sits inside of the NMDA receptor. The NMDA receptor is an ionotropic receptor. It means that it will open up its ion pore. Ions like calcium will flow in and will change the electrical gradient in that neuron, and that sends signals. That's the basics of neurotransmission. Magnesium being in that ion pore means that it is much harder to activate the NMDA receptor, and this seems to have a cognitive and neuroprotective effect. We wanted to enhance this a little bit more, so we put in agmatine, which acts as an NMDA antagonist, and then we put in polygalatine-eufolia, which also acts as an NMDA antagonist, and then some vitamin C, which helps this process along, and vitamin D, which helps that process along a little bit more too. So the main effect of Claromag is that it is more mood boosting and more nootropic. And it contains micromag as one of its forms of magnesium, and then magnesium glycinate as the other one, which is interesting because glycine also modulates NMDA function. So we got a whole big NMDA picture there. This is, for example, my uncle. He recently got into supplements quite a bit, and he loves Claromag. That's his absolute favorite. He's in his 70s. He says it makes him feel young again cognitively, which is really interesting to see, especially because this is a stack that I had a heavy hand in, so it's always nice to see those stacks affecting family members very beneficially. Okay, so those are the nootropic ones. And now we're going to move on to the more mood, relaxing sleep ones. So the two there would be magnesium glycinate and Tauromag, magnesium acetyltaurine. Magnesium glycinate, for most people, the glycine portion is going to be quite relaxing. It is an inhibitory neurotransmitter. It's somewhat similar in effects to GABA. A lot of people respond to it very nicely. We respond to it very nicely. It has a relaxing effect, has a mood-boosting effect. Some people, it's a very small portion of people, seem to have a paradoxical stimulation effect with magnesium glycinate. So if you've ever taken magnesium glycinate and you feel a little bit stimulated, it's probably from the glycine. Go try a different magnesium supplement, and that will work totally fine probably. There's just this weird paradoxical effect to glycine that no one seems to really know why it's happening. If it works well for you, magnesium glycinate produces a mildly relaxing effect, which for us works perfectly for like a daytime effect. Another thing that I really like about glycine is that, or magnesium glycinate, is that the glycine portion is important for glutathione synthesis. So glutathione is a peptide, and part of this peptide has glycine in it. So if you increase your glycine intake, you can stimulate the endogenous biosynthesis of glutathione a little bit more. So we like to take glutathione, so having a bit of glycine in our stack through magnesium glycinate helps there, and I just generally like the effects. So we've been on that for the last 2 months or so. Once I get bored of that one, we'll probably move on to a little bit more what we're doing here with the drink mix. And then the other one is Tauromag, which we've talked about quite a lot. It is super relaxing. If I'm having some neck pain, or I'm having some DOMS from the gym, or a different type of workout, or I'm generally just feeling a little bit tense, Tauromag helps dissolve that. It's quite physically relaxing, and part of it is probably because magnesium itself is a calcium channel blocker, and then acetyltaurine is also a calcium channel blocker, so those two together then produces a very nice physically relaxing effect and also a mood boosting effect. And one really interesting thing about Tauromag is that for a lot of people, it increases their deep sleep significantly. I've noticed this, Erika's noticed this, but interestingly, Erika usually has really good deep sleep. I usually have medium deep sleep. For me, my deep sleep went up quite a lot when I tried Tauromag a few times before bed, and actually the last week I've been taking it every night before bed, and my deep sleep has definitely improved. It's now consistently above 2 hours. REM sleep is staying kind of similar. For Erika, it's actually pulled your deep sleep down a little bit.
But my REM sleep has increased. And
so it's more balanced.
Now I'm thinking the other night, well, or I should say the other morning, I woke up, I looked at my watch, and I saw that I had over 2 hours of REM sleep, which is like unheard of for me. I don't think I remembered that I had taken Tauromag the night before, but now it's all coming back to me.
Yeah. So now one thing I'm doing, I always have a bit of water before bed, get a little bit hydrated. So now I've just been putting a scoop of magnesium in my nighttime hydration beverage. And that's been working really nicely. It's another way to get a little bit of extra magnesium in. And that kind of brings us to one of the last aspects of magnesium, and that's that it seems to have a very important effect on stress. If we're stressed, we excrete more magnesium. We see our extracellular magnesium levels go up. This decreases our intracellular levels. And because of this, we're also excreting more magnesium through our urine. And magnesium is important for protecting us against the effects of stress. So there's a really good French study. We'll link it in this video. You'll get a lot of that data in there too that we were talking about earlier with the Germans getting 511 milligrams of magnesium per day. There's some really, really good jumping off points in this study. And within this study, they look at the vicious cycle or circle, I think they're calling it, of magnesium and stress. So stress reduces magnesium levels. Magnesium is protective for stress. So if we're reducing magnesium levels because of higher stress, then we're increasing stress, and the cycle continues, and we keep getting lower and lower and lower in magnesium. And they had done some studies in stressed individuals, and they looked at their magnesium levels, and 45% had subclinical magnesium deficiency. Then they looked in people with mood disorders, and again, you're seeing quite a high percentage has low levels of magnesium. So we have one, decreasing magnesium levels in our food because of unsustainable farming practices, processing of food, drinking demineralized water. All of these things are adding to a generally lowered level of intake. And then we're all quite stressed. We're maybe stressed because we're not getting enough magnesium. We're getting about 220 milligrams of magnesium for the average American. That's not enough. That could be contributing to stress, and that could then be a feedback loop where we get lower and lower and lower magnesium status.
I want to throw a tiny little wrench into this feedback loop by asking a question about alcohol intake.
Yeah.
Because this is another thing you've probably noticed when you have a couple drinks. the next day, especially if it's warm outside, you might notice that your muscles are cramping more, or perhaps you experience it even while you're asleep, that you'll get cramps in your feet or maybe your calf muscles. I definitely experience that from time to time after drinking more alcohol than normal. And then I'm wondering, what effect does this have on our magnesium status?
It lowers magnesium, and it's also a physical stressor, and that lowers magnesium levels too. So alcohol intake, if you're consuming a lot of alcohol, you probably need way more magnesium than the average person. Alcohol is a diuretic. All diuretics end up in losing more minerals because you pee them out. So that's not good. And also for athletes, people who sweat a lot, you're also losing more magnesium through your sweat, and that needs to be replenished. So there's a lot of factors that go into proper magnesium status. And if you are testing for it, test for intracellular levels, test your white blood cells, your white blood cells and red blood cells. You can test those for seeing how much magnesium is actually inside of those. That's a good way of looking at intracellular levels. Joshua actually talked about this on our podcast a little bit, about how you need to be very mindful of how you test for different mineral deficiencies. With magnesium, it's kind of hard. And stress is a big one, because here's the thing. Stress increases extracellular levels of magnesium. So if you're stressed and you go take a magnesium test that's only looking at serum levels of magnesium, they're going to be through the roof. It's going to look good, but your intracellular levels might be low. And that's not good. So it's kind of hard to actually diagnose a deficiency of magnesium. You have to be pretty advanced with your testing there, and basically looking at all of the averages of magnesium intake. Most places in the world, you're probably not getting enough. So I would say pretty much for everyone, adding 100 to 200 milligrams of elemental magnesium is going to have a positive effect. It certainly has for me. Again, magnesium is involved in so many different processes, so many enzyme systems. For example, tryptophan hydroxylase, the enzyme that forms serotonin from dietary L-tryptophan, won't work properly without magnesium. So again, this works into that stress vicious cycle, and the French study talks about this. So I definitely recommend reading that as a follow-up. It's a pretty easy to understand study, and it talks a lot about various lifestyle factors surrounding magnesium status.
I'll be sure to link that study in the description of this podcast, which is going to be below the YouTube video and in the details of Spotify and all those different streaming platforms as well, so that you can read it and get some background from the source itself.
And I really think we've talked about all of our magnesium products. We've talked about where magnesium comes from on a universe level.
A little bit about the perceptible benefits and effects that you might experience when taking some different forms of magnesium, and the fact that the magnesium itself is not going to be contributing to these effects, but it's what the magnesium is coupled with.
And that's a little bit too simplistic. Magnesium definitely has effects on its own, but if you've corrected your magnesium status, that's the main thing you want. So magnesium deficiency, bad. Good magnesium status, good, and that's just going to enhance metabolic function, muscle cramping, muscle recovery, hydration, all of this. Sleep. Focus. Magnesium helps with that. But if you want to get some more pronounced effects, then you need to pick magnesium forms that have been complex with things that are also biologically active and produce a specific type of effect. And that's kind of what we went over here. If you just want to experience the effects of pure magnesium and elevating your magnesium status, if you are low in magnesium, you'll probably notice quite a big change with Micromag and magnesium glycerophosphate, and with all of them. But even though we're saying those are neutral and Erika and I don't feel it, doesn't mean you won't feel it, because Erika and I have had properly adjusted magnesium status for years. I started taking magnesium when I was 18. So for me, it's been 12 years of daily magnesium supplementation. So my magnesium status is probably pretty ideal. So I personally don't notice a huge difference between the different neutral forms of magnesium. They all work well for me. So for me, it's really fun now to play around with the different magnesium forms that produce a unique effect, like Tauromag. That's going to be different if this is your first foray into magnesium supplements, I would say maybe just start with something like Micromag or magnesium glycerophosphate. Really feel what magnesium can do for you, and then go to the next level, which is things like Tauromag, where it gets much more specialized. And maybe don't even look at those as magnesium supplements, more so supplements that just happen to contain magnesium and are designed to produce a very specific effect. If you just want to enhance your magnesium status, then Micromag, magnesium glycinate, those are perfect. But you can tailor your experience however you want it, and that's why we have so many different ones. I hope this is a good guide to selecting a magnesium, and let us know what your favorite ones are.
We take magnesium every single day, and we're always testing out the effects and also our sleep effects from each different form of magnesium. So if you have questions about specific forms and you want some more personal anecdotal information, you can always tag Emiel on Reddit. Our subreddit is r/Nootropics Depot, and Emiel's username is
Pretty chill.
So you can chat with him directly there, and you can also let us know what your experience with certain forms of magnesium is just in the comments of the YouTube video or on Spotify. There's ways to interact with us all over the internet, so don't be shy. Definitely reach out and share your experience with us and let us know what you are feeling from these new forms of magnesium, if you've tried them yet, or if there's one of them that's on your list. We would love to hear from you. So with all of that being said, as always, you can find specific detailed chapters in the description of this podcast. You can find links to our other social media pages, as well as studies that we referenced in the podcast. And we're so glad that you find this podcast interesting and useful and informative, because we have a lot of fun researching and discussing each month's topic with you, and just finding new fascinating information about where these really essential elements of life are actually coming from in the universe, and how it's going to help us benefit our health and our mood and just our daily lives. So with all of that, we're going to say goodbye for now, and we'll see you next month on In Search of Insight.
See ya.